I'm so glad you've joined us today, mamas. I am recording my podcast from our midlife motherhood community today. And I want you to know, if you are new around here, we're so glad you are here. This is a safe place for midlife mamas to learn and grow. You know, we've been so beautifully supported in our motherhood role as our kids were little and as they're growing. And then when our kids reach adulthood, it seems like the world goes quiet and we're left with all these questions. What am I supposed to do now? What does my motherhood look like? How do I let go? How do I love my child well? How do I handle expectations? There are just so many questions. And so this place is where the midlife mamas gather. Today we are continuing our conversation. It's part 2, Lessons on Love from the Father. And we are talking about just this famous story in Luke. It's Luke chapter 15. We've all heard the story. And I want to read it for you today. And we're going to talk about some lessons that we are learning from this father. So let's go ahead with the parable of the lost son. It says, there was a man who had 2 sons. The younger one said to his father, Father, give me your share of the estate. So he divided his property between them. And not long after that, the younger son got together all he had, and he set off for a distant land, and there squandered his wealth in wild living. And after he had spent everything, there was a severe famine in the whole country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to a citizen of that country, who sent him to his fields to feed the pigs. He longed to fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. And when he came to his senses, he said, how many of my father's hired men have food to spare, and here I am starving to death. I will set out and go back to my father and say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired men. So he got up and he went to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him, and he ran to his son, threw his arms around him, and kissed him. The son said to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. But the father said to his servants, Quick, bring the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandal on his feet. Bring the fatted calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate. Friends, isn't that a wonderful story? And we're going to focus on the father. What can we learn from this father and the way he treated this son? Last week we talked about the first 2 things that he did. First of all, the father surrendered his wants. Isn't that amazing that he didn't argue with the son? He didn't say, no, don't leave. You can't have your inheritance. He literally let go, gave the son the inheritance, and watched the son leave. He released him. And then the father was expectant. The father was ever watchful, ever thinking and knowing, my son's going to return. I believe it in my heart. I believe it. And so today we want to talk about the last 2 things that the father did. And these are lessons that we can apply to our own children. When our children have walked away from God, when our children have walked away, even in their relationship with us. I know that some of you mamas have a strange relationship with your kids, and it's very difficult. The thing we're going to talk about today is that the father was patient. Oh, gosh, mamas, could we learn this a little bit? Like, do we just struggle being patient, waiting for our kids to turn around, to come back? Can you imagine what the father was like? Can you imagine how his thoughts often returned to his son? And I imagined he wondered what his son was doing. But we don't see the father wallowing. We don't see him not continuing on with his life. It's like the father just kept doing what he did. He kept doing the things that he needed. But you don't see any sense of distress. You just see him patiently waiting. And I bet each day he would look down the lane and wonder, I wonder if today's the day I will see my son. And so he was patient. He went about his business, but he waited patiently, resolute, and at peace. And I think, oh my gosh, what a beautiful example for us mamas as we are waiting on our own children. We do not have to be wallowing in distress. We do not have to be stop living our lives. We can still go on. We can still move forward, just trusting that God is doing the work. God is the one who will draw our child. That is not our job, but we're responsible to trust God in the process and to just wait on him. And I know waiting is hard. We do not want to be patient. This is a really hard thing, but we know that patience is a fruit of the Spirit. And so it comes from our connection with God. When we move closer to God, when we lean in and we say, Holy Spirit, help me in this waiting, He is very much willing to help us while we wait. And then the next thing we learn is that the Father welcomed him home. What a party! What party this father threw. And so the son humbled himself and he came home. And you know what we don't see in this passage anywhere? We don't see the father lecturing him. We don't see the father saying, well, what were you doing? What did you do with your inheritance? Where did it go? We don't see him having any condemnation or judgment against this child. Instead, he welcomes him. He welcomes him with a warm embrace. The passage says that the father was ever looking for the son to return. And can you imagine the joy that he felt that day when he saw his son coming up the lane? And the son who was humble and broken, and the father wrapped him in love and said, welcome home. I'm so glad you're here. I'm so thankful to see you, and I want to throw you a party. Oh gosh, when our kids walk away, when they walk away from their faith, when they walk away from us for whatever reasons, we know that these relationships with our adult kids can be complicated, and sometimes there's addiction, sometimes poor choices that our adult children have made, and so that's so hard for us. But God is asking us to be like this father and to maintain these bonds of affection. Like, it is so important. And when we can't love on our own, we ask the Holy Spirit to love through us. See, that's what our connection with God does, is that He empowers us through the Holy Spirit to keep loving our kids. You know, we think about the stories that God leaves us. God leaves us and we're like, wow, God, I'm so thankful that you put the story in your word so that we would have it to look at, to learn from, to know that when our kids venture away, there's this encouragement. There's this hope. And I think that's what I see most in this father, is that he's just filled with hope. He's filled with expectancy. He's filled with hope. He's trusting God, and he's filled with peace. And mamas, isn't that what we need? I feel like as I'm waiting for my children to return to God, this is how I want to be. I want to be content, trusting God, resolute that He is at work, that He is writing their stories, and I don't have to have a say in how this story goes, but I can trust Him knowing that He loves them so much, and He will help me love them. And that's our calling as mamas, is to just love our kids. Our love isn't conditional. And so I'm so thankful for the story of this father who just teaches us how to love well. So join us next week as we are going to make a little shift. We're going to be talking about expectations. And oh my goodness, mamas, do we not struggle with our expectations? I feel like I had a list a mile long of expectations I had about my adult kids. And to learn to release those is a very challenging thing, but we're going to be talking about it next time. So I hope to see you then. Bye-bye. Thanks for listening. If you would like to be part of a community of other midlife mamas, please join us in the Midlife Motherhood Community Facebook group. We have live conversations just like this each week. To catch all the latest from me, follow me on Instagram at phinkelman. And for show notes, head to my website, pamelahinkelman.com/podcast for all my free resources to support midlife mamas. Until next time, remember, there's grace for the next phase of parenting.